This morning, again, I have the good fortune to meditate with you while Kriyananda is out of town. Some spiritual business. Today, the theme of what I'm going to talk about is the good God. Or I lovingly say they forget the other O, whoever they are. Now you may have heard that in source religions, source cultures, that God is always a four-letter word. In German it's GUTT, G-U-T-T. In Scandinavian countries, G-O-D-D, God. And the one we're familiar with is from the Greek culture, the good God, G-O-O-D. God being a four-letter word, not three. And that's important. There's some symbolisms which are going on with the numbers, the 4 versus the 3. And it's hopefully after this meditation this morning, you'll have a little clearer understanding of what I'm trying to say with this introduction. The way I'm going to approach this is to say to you that God has 4 feet, 4 letters. And there's even a symbolism within that, because if you imagine a table with 2 feet is not a sturdy table. A table with 3 feet is not all that sturdy. You get a table with 4 feet, that's the way they're all made, 4 legs. And so you have a very sturdy foundation to build something on. The same is true for God. You need 4 aspects to God if you really want to make him a good foundation, a good God. The first foot that I want to talk about is God, the divine word, the Vak. The second foot is God, the creator. The third foot, God, the mathematician, my favorite. And the fourth, God, the divine love. Over the past few weeks, Kriyananda has been talking about the Upanishads. And a week or two ago, he talked about Mandukya Upanishad, spelled with a M-A-N, Mandukya. And that particular Upanishad had talked about Om, the sacred syllable, the sacred letter, Om. And the Om, as some of you may know, is used to announce the presence of God, or it's used to announce God. Now, Om is a 4-letter word, A-U-M-M. And if you go to Hinduism, you look at the word and you say it's a word, and really that's all it is, and you think of it as a word. But really there's more to it than that. If you go into the yoga, mystical side of Hinduism, you find that the Om is a divine word. It's the Vak, and it's the first foot of God, announcing the presence of the divine. The A has to do with the creation. It starts in the back of the throat, or in the back of the mouth, rather. And the A is pronounced with an open mouth, A, and is symbolically to represent creation. In Hinduism, they would say it's Brahma, the creator. Then from there, it kind of smoothly rolls forward to the middle of the mouth, again with the mouth open, and you have an U, the U, A-U. And this has to do with the sustainment of the creation. In Hinduism, represented by Vishnu, the god Vishnu. And then the final M, with the mouth closed, we have the god Shiva. And symbolically, death, or I would prefer to say transformation, because there really is no such thing as death, only a transitional stage there from one form to another. And so you have AUM, as you'll see it commonly spelled, which is a 3-letter word. But then there's a fourth factor which comes into the picture, which is the last M, and that's Brahma. The way that really works is you have a creation, a sustainment of that creation, and the death of that creation, or transformation, and those 3 factors are indivisible. You can't have one without the other. The 3 work as a unit. And so we would say that you have Brahma, which is the whole, AUM, or the fourth M. But within that whole, you have 3 aspects, 3 characteristics. You have Brahma, notice the same Brahma and Brahma repeated. Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, sustainment of that creation, and Shiva, the death of the creation. So you really have 4 factors there, not just 3. 3 of them are a little more obvious. You can see them more obviously, but then you have to look at the whole, the entirety, and that's the 4th factor in the picture. And it's 2 letters being repeated. God is a 4-letter word, and I don't remember if I mentioned this, but 2 of the letters are always repeated, just like Brahma and Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu. So there's 2 types of Brahma. There's 2 M's in Om. And really it's only when you look at all 4 factors, the all-inclusive aspect of the Om, the good God, that you really begin to understand what it's all about. And that's the first foot of God. From there I move over to the second foot of God, which I'm going to shift cultures on you, shift trains of thought, and go over to the Hebrew culture, the mystical Hebrew, called Kabbalah. And in Kabbalistic tradition, which we have Jewish tradition, Christian tradition, which I think a lot of you should be familiar with, the name of God is Jehovah. There's 2 factors which come into this picture with God, Jehovah, and 2 things I've heard throughout the years. The first is that, first of all, Jehovah is not adequate. It's totally inadequate for describing God. The second thing that I've heard is that you can't pronounce the name of God. I heard that when I was very young, and I have wondered about it quite often. Why can't you pronounce the name of God? And what is the mystical hidden factor in there? Why can't you pronounce it? Jehovah, I just did it. What do you mean you can't pronounce it? But what you find if you delve into the Kabbalistic tradition, you find that where Jehovah comes from is IHVH. In Hebrew, the I is Yod, H is Ha. The V is Va, and the H is Ha. So you've got IHVH, which is Yod Ha, Va Ha, the name of God, which is 4 letters, 2 of the letters being repeated. So you have Yod Ha, Va Ha, or you would say Jehovah. The reason that they say that the name is totally inadequate, when you say Jehovah, that's totally inadequate for describing the God Jehovah, is because Jehovah isn't Jehovah, it's Yod Ha, Vad Ha. It's 4 letters, which means 4 characteristics of this supreme deity. And the 4 characteristics are the birth, sustainment of that birth, and death. Now, whether that's a human being, or it could be an animal, it could be a tree, it could be a solar system. But it includes really all life. Now, this is really portrayed, I think, very nicely, and it's one of the aspects of the Hebrew language, which I like to talk about, I like to say, and it's not only Hebrew, but this also pertains to Sanskrit and any really sacred language. We say that it's sacred because, in my opinion, it's the letters are alive. They're not dead. That's why it's sacred. Now, in Hebrew tradition, there are 22 letters. And according to tradition, when God decided to create the universe, the first thing he did was he talked to the Torah. The Torah was a female aspect. And so God and the Torah were coexistent, symbolically meaning that before anything happened, there were two characteristics of God, those characteristics being both male and female. They can't be separated. They are a part of the divinity, male and female. And each is an equal part. This being portrayed in a story, in a symbolic story, as God, the Creator, talking to the Torah, which is supposed to be the law. It's just, so to speak, God talking to himself, if you want to think of it that way, although that's not really totally accurate. It's just saying that there's two characteristics of God, the Creator, male and female. So he talked to the Torah, which is female. And he said, I think I'm going to create men in the world. And the Torah said, you'll be sorry. And he didn't listen. He didn't listen to the better half. And he created the universe, created the world. And he was sorry. While he was debating or deciding to create the universe, the story goes and it says the 22 letters descended from the august crown of God. And the 22 letters of the Kabbalah, each one stood up and said to God, create the world, create the universe through me. The letter Ta came forward first, which happens to be the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Ta, and it says, create the world through me, because Torah begins with T, and Torah is divine. And God says, though that's true, Ta is also going to be the sign of death upon the foreheads of men. And so I'm not going to create the universe through you. The letter Shin stepped up to God and says, create the world through me. And you should create it through me because Shaddai, thine own name, begins with the letter Shin. And God says, well, though that's true, it's also the first letter in Shah, which means lie, and Checker, which means falsehood. And so God says, I'm not going to create the world through you. And each of the letters in turn came up to God and says, create the universe through me. And they said, here's a good reason. And God says, well, there's a positive side, or there's this one side of your nature, there's a second side. And the final letter to come up to God, well, the second to the last, was Beth. And the letter Beth says, blessed be the Lord forever. Create the universe through me. And God says, that's true. Blessed be thee that cometh in the name of the Lord. And so he decided to create the world through Beth. And he did. And the only letter of the alphabet that didn't say anything, that was silent, was Aleph. And so God, in respect to that, made Aleph the first letter in the Decalogue, which is the Ten Commandments. Now, what I'm trying to say with this is that if you want to look at a sacred language here, in this case Hebrew, the important factor to remember, and what I'm trying to point out, is that the letters are not dead. They're not like, we say A, B, C, and you make words out of them, and really the letters don't mean anything. What's trying to be stated here is that the alphabet is a living alphabet. It's not a dead thing. It's alive. It was alive then, at the beginning of the universe. Before the beginning it was alive, and it's alive today, and it will always be alive. And so I'm back to the four letters of God, Yod, Ha, Vad, Ha. What that's saying is that there's four living characteristics of God, of Jehovah. Yod, Ha, Vad, Ha. Yod being the great father, the seed of creation, according to Hebrew tradition, and sometimes symbolized as Abraham. And so you have a whole personality just in one single letter. You have the Ha, which is the mother symbol, the ocean of creation, the infinite ocean of creation. So you have Yod Ha, Va, Son, the pattern of creation in the Va, and the final letter Ha, the bride. So it's a four-letter word, the two letters being repeated, each letter being a characteristic of life, just as in Om, each letter is a characteristic, each letter is alive. You might also note, just maybe a little aside, that the Yod Ha Va, we have father, mother, and son, or you might say father, son, father, mother, and daughter. It became father, mother, and son, Yod Ha Va, or as pronounced in Jewish Yeva, which became Eve. And so you have an Eve, which is the divine mother, truly the divine mother. This later became, as you know it, the Trinity, which is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But if you'll notice, we drop back to the three legs, is what I'm trying to say. We took one of the principles and we dropped it, and we went to a threefold Trinity, and it became, because it wasn't stable, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And we lost the feminine principle, and that's really a no-no. It's going to create a lot of problems. You ignore the woman. If you've ever ignored a woman, you'll know that that's problems right away. Immediately you got problems. And somewhere in the past 6,000 years, which I call the period of modern man, after a lot of fighting and bloodshed, the female principle was dropped. It should not have been, but it was. And so we lost something very important. The fourth letter is extremely important. The fourth letter in this case, Yod-Ha, Vad-Ha, is the bride. And also the second letter is the Great Mother. So we have some similarities there. You have the Great Mother, which contains everything, and then you have the bride, which also is like a little mother. And so you have this Great Mother, the divine, and you have you could say the Earth Mother or Mother Earth, however you want to look at it. The two look the same in terms of both being mothers, both being parents, but you can see that there's a difference between the two. Anyway, later on in Christianity, Neo-Judaism, Christianity, Gnosticism, which is mystical Christianity, the Yod-Ha, Va-Ha became, you may be familiar with this with INRI. Again, you have four letters, two letters being repeated, and those being the name of God. Now, I asked a priest once what INR, when I was younger, what INRI means, because that's, if you're not familiar with that, that's on some of the crucifixes. If you go out, you'll see on the crucifix at the top of it, it says INRA, and it was one of those things that they were supposed to have nailed at the top of the cross of Christ. I asked the priest once what that meant, and he said that was the name of God. Now, later on, that was translated as, in Latin, Jesus Nazarenus Rex Iodorum, or something like that. And he says that means Jesus, King of the Jews. That's wrong. It literally, INRA, you can abbreviate it and say that that's supposed to be some translation, and unless you understand, if you understand what I'm saying today, the IRNI is truly the name of God, but it's the name of God not as a word. It's as four distinct characteristics of the divine nature of all life, of you, of me, of this earth, of the animals, the plants, the sea, the universe. And so that's the second foot of God, God the Creator, I'm calling it. You have a third foot of God, which has to do with, a few moments ago, I mentioned you can't pronounce the name of God. The modern name of God, which explains why you can't pronounce the name of God, has to do with mathematics. The third foot I'm calling mathematics. And it has to do with God as a mathematician. And you're familiar with the name of God as Einstein gave it to us, E equals mc squared. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with what c squared means in that equation, the c squared means the c times c, so it's a repetition of cc. And you'll note that we have EMCC, 4 letters, 2 letters repeated. Interesting. The mystical translation, modern mysticism of the laws of physics, says that the E energy, it's a symbol. Physicists, scientists of today always use symbols. The E is the symbol of, mystically, what I would call the masculine principle. The M, matter, in the equation has to do with the feminine principle. So we have the masculine and feminine principle, which are always there. And then we have 2 C's. Now, according to physics, the C's are C means light. What isn't obvious but is true is the fact that you have 2 types of light. Now, mystically, we would say you have your internal light, and exoterically, you have the external light, whether you want to call that the Son of God, however you want to look at it. And so you have the third foot of God, the mathematician, being brought forth by modern physics, saying that there's this relation between energy and matter, and the connecting link is light. Divine light, internal light, external light. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. Now, you all thought that Einstein went to a laboratory to come up with his theory of relativity. He was just reading his sacred literature. So we have an equation, E equals mc squared, the name of God. But if you tried to pronounce that, I would say to you, what are you trying to pronounce it for? You can't pronounce that. It's an equation. It's not a word. So you see, truly, you can't pronounce the name of God because it's an equation. It's an equation for life. It's an equation for all life. And we have the third foot of God. The fourth foot, which has to do with divine love, the God of divine love. To start talking about this, what I'm going to make a suggestion, just for a moment. Make a wish. Whatever you may want to wish for, it doesn't matter. Make any wish. You want to be rich, poor, famous. You want to be a priest, a monk, a lover, a husband, a wife, a mother. Doesn't matter. Make a wish. Whatever you, at this point in time, would like or would desire. And then remember only one thing. That God is good and that you'll get that wish. Now, Christianity kind of did a number on us. They said, what you got to do is you got to get rid of one of the O's in the good God. And you got God. Now, what the second O is you see, you have God. G, you have your birth. You have O, what I'll call life. And then you have the D, which is the transformation into a new life, which mystically we would say is an astral life. And then you go to the astral life, and you're born there, and there's a statement on the astral, and then there's another transformation called you come back here. Christianity says, no, that doesn't happen. You don't have this thing called reincarnation or transmigration. That all you have is birth, life, and death. God, G-O-D, 3 factors. You don't have this 4th factor, which is all life, called time, called, you come back. One time you come back as a lover. Another time you come back as a priest. Another time you come back as your rich man. Another time as a poor. This is all life. You're looking at life on a much larger scale, but it's still life. It looks like this life. It's similar to it. The 2 O's, they look the same. But in one case, you're talking about one individual life. The second O is all life. And when you look at all life through all time, any wish that you want, God will grant to you. And He will grant it to you because He's good. 4 letters. Now, if you take rid of this all life and you just look at this life, then you say, I'm not rich. God isn't a good God. And I'd say that's right. You have to look at it on a much larger scale. Of course, then that's time-wise. You also have to look at it space-wise in terms of space. And the space meaning that if you look out into the world, you see different people, different aspects of people, and any of those aspects can be yours at any time. All you have to do is wish for it, and your wish will come true. The 4th foot of God, the God of love, the good God. Now, we say that God loves you because He will grant you all your wishes. And just for a few moments, I want to talk about this God of love. And keeping with the pattern of the 4-fold nature that I'm talking about today, there's 4 types of love. The first type of love has to do with, normally, with the man-woman type of love. That's what most of us are familiar with. A man sees a woman and says, I love you. It's not what he means, but that's what he says. And a woman looks at a man and says, I love you. And that's what she says, but she means something else in terms of the love that I'm talking about, which has nothing to do with sex, although that's the first step. Usually it's just a physical attraction. And what we say is that mystically, it's of no value to fall in love unless you move to a second stage, which is a second falling in love. Now what happens is usually the man and the woman, they see each other and each one says, I love you. And that's the physical attraction, the physical falling in love. But there's a second falling in love which comes, they get married and then they argue and fight and do all sorts of marvelous things. And then somewhere along the line, if it's truly love, if it's love, after the friction, the flame, the fire settles down, the husband looks at the wife looks at the husband and says, I love you. But now it's not, I love you, the physical body, but I love you because I'm beginning to understand truly what your whole personality, what your whole nature is about. And all of a sudden the frictions and the difficulties in dealing with the spouse become secondary. They're not so important. What's important is this love. What you've expanded out is if you haven't caught it, what you're doing is expanding from your own egocentric looking for something very selfish, if I can use that word, terms, to now you've expanded out to include another person in that love. And love is always a growth, if it is love. That's how you tell if something's love or not. It keeps growing. It doesn't get smaller. It grows. And that's what love is. But as far as evolution of all life and of God is concerned, that's nice, and that's a very positive step and a way to go. There must be a third falling in love. And this third falling in love is where you look at the spouse and you see what is beautiful in the spouse. And then you look at life and you see that the spouse is part of life. Life is part of the spouse. And there's another expansion where your love begins to include all life, not just the spouse. There's this expansion there. There's this growth. Again, love is a growth. It's an expansion. A lot of times this manifests in terms of someone becoming a priest. It doesn't have to. That's not a requirement. But a lot of times the person realizes that there's something about life, that there's truly a divine nature in life. And so the priest or the person becomes a priest, whether male or female, it doesn't matter. But like I said, it doesn't have to manifest that way. It can manifest in terms of just the person giving, helping, sharing with others. And what they do is they'll tell you that, you say, why do you help somebody? Why do you do this? Why do you give money? Why do you give your time? Why do you give your effort? And they say, because it makes them feel good. And if you've never experienced this love, you don't understand it. But it's there. It's very definitely a certain amount of bliss, of happiness is obtained or is received by helping other people. Just the act of helping others. It tends to be a little transitory in nature, though, just as the husband-wife type of love is somewhat transitory. Transitory, I mean, it's there sometimes, and sometimes it seems to disappear. It's hard to keep it there. It's hard to keep the love sustained, even with the priest. He has good days and he has bad days, or she has good days and she has bad days. And so it's not a continuous type of bliss patterning or love patterning. It kind of fades in and then fades out. So this fourth foot divine love, of which I've divided into 4 sections, we've moved through 3 now. We have the first step of love, which is quite often the man-woman, which expands out to include all life. And there's a 4th one. We've got the spouse, we've got this life, and we've included all life. What's the 4th type of love? I mean, what can be greater, possibly, than loving all life, all universes, everywhere? How can there be a greater love than that? And in fact, there is. The 4th love, the 4th falling in love, is kind of interesting, or I think it's kind of interesting. It's falling in love with God. And you can say, yeah, nature is God, or God is nature. And you fall in love with that nature. But then there's something even beyond that. You see, because this falling in love with nature is transitory. You see the creation and you understand it, but sometimes it's disagreeable. It gives you an upset stomach, to put it mildly. And with this 4th falling in love, you don't get indigestion. It's a continuous state of bliss, if I can put it that way. It's falling in love with God. And the realization that the creation is perfect, and it is perfect as it is. Tomorrow it's going to be more perfect. But as it is today, it's perfect. And the symbolism there on the more personal level is when it's like when a man says to a woman, "I love you." And then the woman says, "That's absolutely perfect. You said it absolutely perfectly." And the day goes by, the next day comes, and the woman wants you to say, I love you again. And the man says, but I told you that yesterday, and you said it was perfect. And the woman would say, yes, it was perfect yesterday, but today's today. That's different. And so within the perfection, as each day, as time passes on, there's a greater perfection, a greater falling in love. That's kind of like what this fourth state is. There's perfection there, and there's a continuous bliss, which is the greatest state of happiness. But it gets better and better as time goes on. You see, it keeps expanding because it's love. So I'm back to a few moments ago, and I said to you, make a wish. What was your wish for? What did you wish for? Which step are you on the scale? Now remember, no one step is greater than any other step. It's all part of the same cosmos. So you say, I wish I could find a lover, or you might say, oh, I wish I could love nature, or I wish I could love God, whatever the case might be, whatever the wish was. It will come to pass. Eventually it will come to pass. So it doesn't really matter where you are at. I would say the only thing that's really important is that you understand where you are at, and then move to the next stage, to the next step, whatever the other step might be for you. So forget the first wish and make another wish. You get a reprieve. And make a wish. I'm not going to tell you what to wish for, but I would say that whatever that wish is, whatever your dream is, whatever your goal is, make it galactic. Don't make it small. And make it to include all life. Maybe even make it to include God. And you'll be able to come to the awareness, or you will come to the awareness that one day you will get that wish. So like I said, make it big. Don't make it small. And we have the 4 feet of God. God the Word, AUMM, OM. God the Creator, IHVH, Jehovah. God the Mathematician, still my favorite. E equals MC squared. And God the Lover, the good God. Spelled with 2 O's, not just one. G-O-O-D, the good God. And with that, I'm just going to conclude with a short prayer and maybe ask the musicians if they wouldn't mind picking up the mantra for just a minute or two. I'd like to thank you for being here today, giving me the opportunity to share a thought or two with you. And did I lose the musicians? Om Tat Sat Om. Om Tat Sat Om. O infinite Lord, thou knowest better than I that which the world needs. It is for this and this alone that I meditate. I beseech you, bring it into their life, surely, swiftly, and most harmoniously. O infinite Lord, thou knowest better than I that which I need. It is for that and that alone that I meditate. I beseech you, bring it into my life, surely, swiftly, and most harmoniously. Om Tat Sat.